Hey guys, this is Dagon123, and welcome to
Tenchicast.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the next episode of Tenchicast and the final episode in the Tenchicast saga. 165,000 torrent downloads, 166,000 YouTube views, and 4 dedicated souls later, Tenchi Muyo has finished airing and Tenchiforum has finished subbing it for the English-speaking world. To help us through our feels today, Chuck.
Sup, dogs? It's the word on the streets.
Crazed.
What's going on?
Pie.
2014, the year Tenchi came back.
Kiami.
Hello.
Nil.
Harry, I am honored beyond my ability to express myself.
And who?
The carnival's back. How's it going, everyone?
What were your thoughts on Tenchi Muyo's ending, and was it done well?
Well, first off, I want to take this opportunity to say a huge thank you to the translation team, in particular, my good friend, and friend in real life, actually, Titan of Chaos. He really went above and beyond the call of duty. I think this has come out in maybe his first cast in here, but I literally asked him to do this for us 24 hours before the show began, and he literally jumped right at the opportunity and never missed a beat, and really worked his butt off for a show that he knew nothing about, and he's a real trooper. So everyone out there, definitely give him thumbs up, thank him for all the awesome work he does. And also to the 3 people who are in this room right now, Nil Admirari for his endless work, and Crazed and Dagon as well for all the stuff they did. They each and every one of them were an integral and necessary part for bringing this show over. And all those hundreds of thousands of views and downloads, all thanks to them. So big thumbs up to you guys, and thank you so much for all the hard work you did. And now to the question. I thought the ending was well done. The fact that it was the final 2 weeks really helped counter the fact that it was spread out over 10 days. So while it may have been short in a total period of time, the fact that it was spread out over 2 weeks and you had to wait every day to see the next 4 minutes of the finale was really awesome. And that was the one point I think where the 4-minute format really shone the best, was when you were waiting and you were devouring every 4-minute morsel the day it was coming out, and you could see the puzzle pieces falling into place over those final 2 weeks. And so pacing wise, I think the ending was when the 4-minute format was at its best. Plot-wise, I thought it was good. They started pulling together threads rather early on, things that we had questions about, like why was Washu at the school, and that sort of stuff. And so there really wasn't too many questions, in my mind at least, left by the end, so it covered all the bases in that respect. From an emotional standpoint, it was really good. I finally had a reason to actually care about Momo. She was the last character in the show that I was still holding judgment for, and in the very end, she did finally give me a reason to care about her, and I finally came around to really appreciating her character. So it was well done. Other than that, I think it was a good, serviceable ending. It was conclusive, well-rounded, and it left just enough little bit hanging at the end to keep people interested in more, and maybe we'll see it one day.
I loved the ending. All the pieces came together at the end, and it ended, and I was like, "Aw, there are more episodes left." Whenever I wanted more, so I hope we get more.
I'm pretty much gonna have to agree with a lot of what Chuck said. The 4-minute format definitely came into its own there near the end. Definitely helped the ending out. And I like how it ended. It, like Chuck said, left you with it answered a lot of questions, but it left you with just enough questions remaining to keep you wanting more. And I like that. It hasn't done what a lot of Tenchi shows have done in recent history, where where things are over-explained or where irrelevant things are over-explained and major things aren't touched on at all. Tenchi wasn't guilty of any of those things. It did what it needed to do. And I just love the fact that Japanese fans on Twitter would ask Negishi if he would go into further detail and if he would ever get together with the fans in some way and explain everything about the last couple of episodes to them. And Negishi told them, essentially, no, you have to use your imagination. And I like that because when's the last time in a Tenchi show we've had someone tell us, someone who made the show, use your imagination to figure it out. I'm not gonna spoon feed everything to you. So, was the ending well done? In my opinion, yes, very much so.
I gotta say absolutely, and I think you're gonna hear a lot of that for this cast, folks. So no apologies there. Absolutely, when you see not just Benny and Momo reunited, but then you see very much Negishi as though signing his signature on it. Ryoko and Tenchi embrace, and there's the, in this case, peach blossom petals. They're from Momo's tree, but absolutely he was evoking imagery straight out of universe, and by extension straight out of our memories. And so it was, I was just absolutely just ecstatic when I was watching like the last two episodes, and the way it ended with Ryoko is at her usual, one of her many usual lounging spots around the shrine, and it's just a typical day in the Masaki household with Mihoshi and Aika and Sasami, very much as we remembered them all those years ago, no matter what continuity you're remembering, because it pulls from so many. So it was absolutely, it was a beautiful ending, and it left me wanting more, and I do not think that was an accident. So here's to more, thanks to that ending.
Tenchi held its cards close to the chest pretty much through its entire run. And I mean, in a way, it sort of had to, because it needed something to kind of keep you going. The beginning, there was definitely a heavy emphasis on the new characters, but it, necessity. It had to be that way so that you would care about them, so that the rest of the show, the finale, would actually mean something by the end of it all. And it was all coming down to these final 2 weeks. I think getting rid of Momo's afterwards, at the end of every week, her reflections, it really spoke that was what they were really pushing for and driving towards the whole time. And I think it was perfectly done in the way that you got to learn about everybody as the series progressed, get to kind of understand where everybody's come from, and then have it turned on your head, and in the period of 2 weeks have just all this crazy stuff start happening and need to get resolved. And it was practically nail biting, like, okay, how is that going to work? How is, the GP seems so confident in doing this, but Washu seems to have something up her sleeve, but what's up her sleeve? And then Friday comes along and you don't have the answer to that yet, and you're legitimately frustrated because you need to know, you want to know, but you have to wait. Even though it's only 5-minute episodes a day, 4-minute episodes a day, you get one every single day. Just the rapid fire presentation, it kept you off your, it kept you on your feet and just wanting to know what was going to happen next. It was a different type of storytelling compared to the usual show setup. And I think it's, considering the constraints that it had, something that we had read from Negishi's Twitter when he was talking about doing, a couple years ago, about 5 years back, there was talk of doing a Tenchi Muyo and Love 3, and obviously that didn't quite get all the way through for whatever reason. When the idea of doing more Tenchi was brought up again, AIC President Mura had said that he wanted to do a show that you could watch on your commute, on your telephone, and not have to worry about missing too much, but upon repeat viewing would still be full of information, for the people who would want to watch it at home. With Tenchi, that was his test bed for that idea. He wanted to try, he wanted to see if Tenchi could work, but he wanted to do it in really, really short format. He initially wanted to do it as a series of 100 episodes at 90 seconds long, and eventually Negishi kind of elbowed him back towards, let's do 50 episodes at 3.5 minutes instead. Like, maybe that sounds a little better to everybody, but they were pushing for it, trying to make this work, and eventually they reached that negotiation. Like, okay, 50 episodes, 3.5, almost 4 minutes apiece. Let's see if the world is still ready for some Tenchi. Thoughts on previous weeks aside, the final 2 weeks displayed that Negishi didn't really lose it, and for the people who appreciate things like Tenchi Universe in the movies, he's still perfectly capable of delivering that, and I think should Tenchi take off and Mura give him the reins again, we would be in good hands still. I think the last 2 weeks and the sheer just outburst of love, admiration from fans all over the world who we've taken a look at and talked to, who are just so happy with the way that it turned out and just how nice it was to see these characters in full swing again. That's it. Like, that's how it's going to be. Yeah, I think the ending did very well, and I myself particularly enjoyed it quite a bit.
I really liked the ending. It tied everything together nicely. It had a lot of the hijinks and action adventure you imagine from the Tenchi series, from OVA 1 universe. Hell, even Shades of Tokyo in certain things, the way Momo's character arc concluded. I thought it was very, very enjoyable. I thought it was done very, very well. It was dragging it out over 2 weeks. Definitely added to the nail-biting factor. Definitely made you want to see what was happening next. Endless speculation, and I was having a lot of fun doing some of that speculation. What the hell Washi was going to do. What in the world the GP had up their sleeve. One of the things I loved about this past week was those past couple weeks, were Goriki-kun knocking out of the park, the alien egg Washu puppets. We had also a good dose of good old-fashioned Jiraiyan tree magic in the last week, and that was fucking good to see some of those old concepts being brought back from the first OVA that haven't been touched on since 1992. This show did it well. It did it the way Tenchi should be done.
I will say that I thought Tenchi Muyo's ending was good. Great, even. Very emotional, very angsty in some parts of it, giving off some real Ava vibes as it was going on. I do want to say that I'm glad that Negishi and, by proxy, Tenchi didn't feel the need to, go into grand, ultra, epic, mega space battle just because that has been done before. Just because that is where, as far as the main cast was concerned, that's where we left off. It didn't do things illogically. And, I think that was something that a lot of people had a hard time with as the series was going on, as they wanted to project what they thought should be an eye, and when they didn't get what they thought should have been there, they held that against the show. And I really think that, Tenchi's ending was simple. It didn't have to be very grand. It was short, sweet, and to the point. And that's not only what they had to work with, but that was the whole point. And, I think not going that route says that the people behind it know what they're doing. They know they don't need to fill a quota. They know they need to do what makes sense and what will be good ultimately for the show as a whole. And, speaking of things that wouldn't fit, we finally get to see Ryo-Ohki. Even if all she did animation-wise was blink, we got to see her. At the very end, we got to see most of the residents of the Masaki household at the Masaki Shrine. It was a very heartfelt ending, looking at the where Benny and Momo ended up. And ultimately, I don't think for the format, it was amazingly done and very, very well put together. Now that the show is over, has your opinion changed from when you first started watching? And if so, at what point or for what reason did it change?
I don't know if I'd say my opinion changed. From the very beginning, I approached this show very cautiously. I wasn't going to make any assumptions or jump to any conclusions. So, I guess maybe my opinion about the viability of the 4-minute format was the one that changed the most. Going in, I was very skeptical whether or not I'd be able to get any sort of sense of drama or danger or excitement from the 4-minute format. And that changed at the end. As I said before, the ending really drove home the suspense of watching something throughout the week in 4-minute chunks. But in the beginning, I was very skeptical. And I guess when that started to change was around when they first started digging up crazy stuff from under the school. Because then I really wanted to know, like, okay, like, what is under there? When are they going to get back to that? In the beginning, I thought it would be a very lighthearted show. I was not sold on the idea that it would be a traditional grand story sort of thing, as we've seen in previous Tenchi series. I thought, being that it's largely funded by Takahashi City, it'd be a very lighthearted, terrestrial setting, school comedy sort of thing. And for a while, nothing really changed in my opinion. I'd say that first started to change when we started seeing a lot more callbacks to the original show. Like we see the Tenchikin sword. We start seeing Washu crabs around, and then it sort of gave off the vibe of, okay, maybe things are coming down the road. But overall, I'd say I always liked the show. I always enjoyed it. There were some moments early on that gave me some pause, but they dealt with them very quickly. So I always liked the show, and the only thing that really changed, in my opinion, was just how good I thought it would be, and it exceeded my original expectations. So for that, I am grateful.
Well, my opinion changed pretty quickly, just, watching it. Because it was Senshi, so it gave it a chance. And at first I didn't really know how to feel about it, like, because, there's new girls and new series and new character designs and no Kione, but, it's like, what's going on? But everything came together in the end and added up, and I found all the new characters just as lovable as their old friends, and, she was awesome. So, yeah, I realized pretty quickly that it was good series.
When we first learned about this show, I tried to do the same thing as Chuck. I tried not to jump to any knee-jerk opinions right off. I wanted to see it. I wanted to see a little bit more of an explanation behind it. And when we first learned about the show and we learned it was an advertisement series, I was like, well, I don't really know how I'm going to feel about this, because it's just going to be them walking around the city advertising a bunch of different places. There's not really going to be a whole lot to it. I don't know. It doesn't sound like my thing. Then when we learned that no, Tenchi's going to be a teacher, my opinion changed quite a bit. I said, okay, for an advertisement series, this is an interesting way to take it. And then when it started, first thing we see in the first episode is a panty shot on Momo where she falls on Tenchi's face, and it's a whole bunch of new girls there in the school with him. I'm like, okay, definitely not the advertisement series I thought it was, but I still don't really know how to feel about this. Is it going to be one of those very generic high school animes? Because I'm not really into that kind of thing. And when we saw the whole new cast of characters, I didn't know how to feel either. Because in a Tenchi series, that's like walking through a minefield. Like, you better be prepared for what you're about to do. But, like Chuck said, as it went on, I thought it was going to be a little bit more lighthearted. And then we start to see the overarching plot appear. And those last 2 weeks, I'd say my opinion of this show has changed quite drastically from when we first learned about it way back when.
When it was first announced, I was excited. I was like, new Tenchi, yes. And in the back of my mind, I thought, even if I don't really care for it that much, yes. When I was hearing about Nagishi's involved, I was hearing about it was going to be a revamp of things. There's some new characters, and updated looks for contemporary anime fans. I said, yes, this is a good thing, objectively. I was a little nervous, though, going in. I said, okay, here we go. New characters and the veneer of the contemporary over it. I said, how much of this is going to be Tenchi, and how much is going to be, for lack of better words, no offense, but just, cliche, run-of-the-mill, new-esque anime, I guess. And it starts off like it throws you in there. You get the new characters. You got to wait a little for the old characters. you got Tenchi in these incredibly like crazy situations right off the bat. These like these like bondage scenes, and and then you've got Ukan, and you're like, oh my goodness, she's like this dominatrix or something. Like, oh, what's gonna happen? Here we go. But soon enough, my fears were put to rest. I think one of the first ones where I was just freaking out was when they brought in the old girls, Ryoko and Aika, and we were all freaking out over how amazing the transition was to the new look worked for them, and how their personalities were there. It was them. It was them, as though we caught up with them X number of years later, and life just went on for the Misaki household. And then I remember another one was when they did the callback kind of to the universe where Mahoshi's in her mech and Ryoko is like old school Ryoko, and she's just kicking ass, and I'm like, yes. And I think a key moment, and this repeated itself multiple times throughout the series, but the first really key moment I can think of for me personally was our episode 17. I believe it's the festival begins, and there's a reason we chose that for Chibi Pa. If you've seen that video, when we were introducing it to people there, I was astounded, because every Tenchi series has always had that problem of you introduce a new character, especially, it's inevitably a new girl. People are just going to hate, or people are going to be skittish, gun shy, as I think most of us or all of us were with Ai. So it was no exception there. But there's just no way I could imagine, and there's no way that you could have done better than Negishi did in terms of the balance and the dynamic between new characters, giving them depth, giving them screen time, letting them grow, and letting us warm up to them, and giving proper tribute and screen time and love to the classic cast. And then that episode, you have them both, they were both kind of built up, and then they both collide there. And the way they interact is just, it's fantastic. I mean, I was laughing so hard. I watched that one over and over again, that particular episode, whenever I just need a good laugh. But it's just phenomenal how everyone interacts, how Aika interacts with Yuki and Rui, and how Sasami is being worshipped as this idol, and how Ryoko gets this, we get bouncer Ryoko, and just everything was right there. And that was, like I said, that was repeated several other times throughout the series, but like that was when, every bit of doubt left my mind, where I was like, this is it. This is pure Tenchi, if you will. It's been brought back, and from then on out, it was just, I'm just going to enjoy the ride. I'm just going to revel in it, because this is awesome.
I will say that in the beginning, I was definitely a little worried about the way the show was starting off, but I kind of tried to keep in mind that the show's probably got to do some things to attract the modern anime crowd that aren't necessarily remembering this show for what it was back in the day. A lot of people don't even know what it is anymore, because it just hasn't been a household name and hasn't been a splash in such a long time. I had a lot of reservations about what I was seeing. The character designs just weren't really speaking to me. They did look like the characters, but I wasn't sure if I liked the sort of superhero-y way that they were being used, and the new characters didn't look visually all that interesting, although they were definitely distinct from one another. They were also based off of tropes that have already existed in other anime that concentrate on high school stuff. So there's always that element of I don't know if this is going to really work out all that much. But I think the key thing was just to keep sticking with it and remember that this is it, man. Like, since 2003 to 2005, when OVA 3 ended, that was the last time that the mainline characters got any sort of massive public attention, because they've been around, but they've been around in a official but not quite official fashion with doujins. They are things that are very limited in scope and distribution. They're not the animation, which is what a majority of the fans are going to see. So for almost the whole fandom, there was practically nothing going on for those characters since 2005, and here we are in 2014, or were in 2014, getting to see them in motion again and getting to see them do things again and be themselves again. And they absolutely were themselves. Every time you saw them, they were every bit of themselves as they always have been. Were they slightly exaggerated? Yes. Definitely not to the Tenchi and Tokyo degree where everybody was definitely a little exaggerated, because that was Tenchi and Tokyo shtick. It was more slapstick. It was more exaggerated. It was played much more for laughs of a different kind than the rest of the series, which is partially why Tenchi and Tokyo tends to be seen, I think, as the black sheep, because the attitude of the comedy changed a bit compared to how it used to be. The characters were still the same, but they were funny in a different way. This brought to mind some of the aspects of Universe and even OVA 1 and 2, where the characters were bouncing off of each other, and the humor was more about the characters and their rather brash personal reactions to everything. And of course, we also got to see a lot of just unique things to this show, like Mahoshi actually doing her job and doing it well while still being, completely goofball about it, and Washu being the master of what she does, and forgetting the one thing, the Achilles heel that she forgot the whole time was standing right behind her the entire time she was doing everything, and then that, put a temporary damper on the plans. I've just been smiling these past few weeks because it was exactly it. That was more what I was wanting out of Tenchi, but I did not dislike it. After the first week, after things started to settle in a little bit, and we began to see a few of the threads of how the old characters were going to be used and introduced, and that they were still the same as they always were. Thank you, Talking Heads. That things were going to be fine. Things were going to be okay, and they were. So I would say, first week, I definitely was a little concerned. But as soon as I gave it the time to let itself explain itself, which realistically was only about 25 minutes. So realistically, I gave it 8 episodes worth of content. And then suddenly everything started making sense and I started liking it more. And I grew to like the new characters. And of course, I loved the old characters. If I'm being honest with myself, was this the Tenchi show that I wanted? Absolutely not. But it was a good Tenchi show, and it was something that this fandom and this series has needed desperately for the past 9 years or so. No, it sucks that it's over, honestly, because I feel like I need more now. I think a lot of fans feel the same. Now that they've seen these characters back in action, they don't just want them, they need them back in action more than ever before. And I'm really hoping that that's what's going on over at AIC right now.
When I first heard this show was announced, I was at a conference, so I wasn't really thinking too hard about it. But I was still happy. I mean, there's new Tenchi coming out. There's potential that it might come this side of the pond. I was pleased. I was saying, yeah, yay, we got new Tenchi. I don't know what kind of Tenchi it's going to be, but it's something. Then when it was announced that Negishi was directing, I was like, okay, I'm on board. What's going to happen here? Was I skittish about the 50 episode format that this thing was going to have? Sure, I had the same reservations Chuck did, is that it couldn't have a really good overarching plot. It was going to be cut up. Then it was pitched that it was going to be a advertisement series. So, oh god, we're going to be wandering around doing this, that, and the other. I had my reservations going in, and then watching the show, I noticed there were hints of commercialism here and there, but really it was much more just the background, the aesthetic, the ambiance of the environment was really what they were pitching for the city of Takahashi. The main plot didn't get really detracted by the advertisement nonsense at all. In fact, I kind of questioned as to whether or not this was an advertisement series anymore. But even then, panty shots, onsen episodes, craziness. I mean, I saw Tenchi, Ryoko, Ayaka, the characters we all know and love, and they were in the forefront doing exactly the way they always were. But I was always kind of wondering when is that other shoe going to drop? When are things going to heat up here? We're not going to be doing school stuff the entire time. We've seen the Tenchiken, we've seen Ukon doing stuff in kind of the shadows. What's going on with her? There was all these questions, and one thing about me, I love questions. So those lingering little threads here and there kind of drew me in. It's like, okay, what are we doing here? What's going on? Then the episode that turned I think all of us around sideways was episode 33. Unfortunately, it aired, of course, when we were all at the convention down in Florida. But that episode, we saw, with the minute we all saw Jirai, jaws dropped, eyes opened. My God, it's happening, and things started coming together. From that point forward, there were still school things that happened. There was the student council election, but after that moment, you notice things start heating up. Benny starts confronting Tenchi. Tenchi starts asking the questions. Shortly after that, they have the confrontation between the student council and the science club, where Ryoko and Ayeka beat down Hachiko and Hana. The action starts heating up pretty much from that moment forward. And that from there to the end, except for the student council election, where it took kind of a dramatic lull, where you had this kind of scandal between Tenchi and Momo. Aside from that, it was wall-to-wall action pretty much to the end of the show. And one thing that I actually made me appreciate the show even more was about 2 days ago, I sat down, queued up the entire thing in VLC, and just marathon the entire thing. It takes about three and a third, maybe 3.5 hours to watch all of it cover to cover. Pulled out the recaps. I apologize. I pulled the recaps out. But I really believe this show stands a lot better when you watch it as a whole, when you watch it as a one unit. Doing so made me appreciate it even more so, because the things that we've been saying that were detractors, things like panty shots and onsen episodes and so on and so forth, they literally are only about 4 minutes long total. And most of those are forgotten because of the craziness that ensues not too long afterward. This show really did do a very good job with what it had to do, and I think that when you see a home media release of this and you're able to sit down and see it all in one sitting, it's going to make a hell of a lot more sense. It's going to make things go a lot more smoothly. In particular, the last 10 episodes. Remember that those last 10 episodes, that's what, little less than 40 minutes of content, and some of that is some of the best stuff I've seen since Tenchi Muyo in Love 2 and the End of Universe. It was very well done. It was very, very condensed. So essentially, when did my opinion change? When did my feelings get amped up? Episode 33, the last 2 weeks of the series, and definitely sitting down and watching it as a whole. Those were the things that really made my opinion of the show start ratcheting up.
I said this in, I think, the third or fourth iCast, but the moment where Ryoko is first shown in the feudal era and she looked strong against Momo, I knew at that point on, or from that point on, that the series was on the right track and would not disappoint. You know, barring, of course, the trepidation that almost every single person had the first week of the show. You know, it's funny, I went back and watched a few of the earlier episodes, and, you know, after having gone through the whole thing and subbed it, and it's interesting to go back and start it over after you've seen everything and after you've been, endeared to the characters. And I really loved the show. You know, I loved how the show progressed, especially in the last third of it, which Pi had mentioned. You know, in my mind, there was no question at that point whether or not it was a good or a bad show, but whether or not it was a good or a great show. So, when I say my opinion changed, I would say that it's continued to stay positive after the first week and after that first part with Ryoko. And the very few negative things that I thought of the show were things that only happened extremely early on. And like Chuck said, and Pi said, people love to say, oh, well, an entire episode was dedicated to, you know, them being in a bathhouse. But in the grand scheme of things, they were in a bathhouse for 3.5 minutes. That's like a sixth of an entire regular TV episode. That's nothing. That's absolutely nothing in the grand scheme of the show. If you could rate I Tenchi Muyo in some way, like out of 5 or out of 10, and so on, what would you rate it and why?
This is a bit tough. It's still rather soon. I tend not to try and put a numerical rating on shows very soon after watching them. I like to let them digest a bit. If I had to say right now, I'd probably give I Tenchi Muyo a 3 out of 5. At its weaker moments, I'd say maybe 2.5, and at its strongest moments, I'd say 3.5, maybe even 4. But on the whole, it was a solid show. It wasn't the heights that we've seen previously, like OVA 1 or the Tenchi Muyo and Love movies, but it was good. It was really good. I enjoyed almost all of it. Like, as we've talked about, there were things in the early part of the show that I think detracted, but they were rapidly dealt with. I've also wrestled pretty strongly with whether or not I include the recaps in my rating system, because now that the show is all done, we can pretty much chuck them out. I mean, they're not even going to be included on the DVD and Blu-ray sets, so I'm almost tempted to remove them from my consideration, but at the same time, they definitely did detract from the watching experience as we were watching it live, having to basically sit out every Friday and just watch what had happened the previous week. I was not thrilled. I never warmed up to that concept. So maybe if you include those, then it prevents the show from getting maybe 3.5 overall. But in the long run, that was really its only major problem as it was airing. I think maybe the middle of the show dragged a little bit, but it was, like I said, they pulled it together in the ending. So maybe we saw a little bit too much school, but for the most part, it wasn't bad. It was very deliberate pacing, being introduced to each and every one of the new characters in their own setting, getting to know them. So I understand why it was done, and I think it was done well. And I don't know if it could have been done too much better, but it was what it was. And so overall I enjoyed the show. I enjoyed the show a lot. I wouldn't say it was mind-numbingly or earth-shatteringly great, and I think a lot of what we're going to remember about this show is going to hinge entirely on if something comes after. Like, if we get a new OVA series, if we get a continuation of I, if we get a movie, then I think we'll all look back and smile a bit more about I, saying this is what brought it on. If we don't get anything, if this was it, I think it won't really detract from I. I don't think I'll get blamed for, like, quote unquote killing the franchise. I think it'll just be it'll be a nice solid capstone. So overall, 3 out of 5 for me.
Well, probably like a 9 out of 10 or 4 to 5, because it wasn't the best series, there's room for improvement, but it was fun and really well done, and yeah, I liked it. But not having Keanu, I liked it.
I don't know, it is kind of tough to put a number rating on this thing. I guess if I had to, I'd probably give it 3 out of 5, maybe 7 out of 10. I think that's about equivalent to one another. If it's not Pi, I'm sorry, don't kill me, I'm still on vacation. I can't math right now. But yeah, that's about what I'd give it. The show definitely had its flaws. It wasn't a perfect show. It wasn't the perfect Tenchi show by any means, but it was still a damn good show. And quite honestly, I think if anybody's blaming this show for killing the franchise, they're full of it, in all honesty, because the show its whole purpose was to revive the franchise, and judging by the reactions, I'd say that's what it did. So I don't really see how you could blame the show for that. I mean, if we're talking about how the show rates in comparison to other Tenchi shows, I don't think it's as good as the first 2 OVAs or Universe or the movies for that matter. I'd put it up above Tokyo, I think. OVA 3, GXP, War on Geminar. There's no question it's above those 3 in my opinion. I think the show overall has fulfilled its purpose quite well of trying to revive this, as Nagishi put it, dead franchise, this dead show. I think it's done that. And here's hoping we get something else out of Tenchi in the future.
I'm going to say 9 out of 10. Sure, we wanted to see Kione. I'm with you all there. Could have been something behind the scenes there that literally prevented them from that. Perhaps time will tell. But nevertheless, she wasn't there, and I think Tenchi fandom as a whole would have liked her to be there. Even if Mahoshi didn't have a whole lot of screen time in this, they found a place for her, and people wanted to see her again. But, and you could look for other things, like this one was more slapstick humor, so there wasn't as many. Actually, someone brought up Tokyo. As comical as that was, of course, had a lot more screen time to work with and such. There was some really, deep emotional moments with Tenchi and the core cast of girls. Didn't really have that with but with the screen time it had to work with, we did get those emotional moments via the new girls, and that also helped build them up as characters. We got the rooftop scene with Benny. We've got multiple scenes like that with Momo and Tenchi. List goes on and on. So for what it did, and for what it set out to do, and for what I think it is doing, it's already reverberating, and what it, the potential of offshoots, what more can we have? Manga, animated form, whatever it may be. I think it absolutely nailed it. It did what it set out to do, and then some. It absolutely, it revitalized the franchise. We're talking about it again as we go into 2015. So, yeah, 9 out of 10.
As much as I despise numerical rating systems, I think I have to come up with some way to narrow it down enough. So let's say 2 red power gems out of 3. It was, as I mentioned before, not the show that I wanted out of a new Tenchi series, and I think a lot of people will feel the same. But I think it's also important to look back upon it as what it was and not what we wanted it to be. The name in the show, Love, was a call sign. It was a flag to wave to say that this is not just any old normal Tenchi show. This isn't Tenchi TV as Universe was known in Japan. This wasn't Shin Tenchi Muyo, which is what Tenchi in Tokyo was known in Japan. This was just straight up known as Love Tenchi Muyo or Tenchi Muyo Love. That right there, that was the statement. That was the mission statement for what the show was supposed to be. It was supposed to be a lot of different things. It's supposed to be an advertisement for Takahashi City. Was it that? Kind of, sort of. I think personally, the way that it's going to go is this was a way to create new characters that Takahashi City could then use in its advertisements, and maybe even have some permission to use the Tenchi characters more liberally with their tourism attempts and their advertising revenues. But the main idea was to give Takahashi City characters of its own, and that's where Momo and Benny and the rest of the science club or the rest of the student council, all those girls may have been made for that specific purpose. This show was to establish them as characters, and then from that point forward, Takahashi City could do whatever the hell they wanted with those characters to advertise the city, to push tourism, to push events, have them be the spokespeople for the area. It's not like this hasn't happened before. There have been plenty of shows that have been done to advertise a town, and then the town uses those characters long after the series has ended. I think that's what's going to happen here. But it wasn't all just about that. Negishi was pushing for more normal episode length, and Mura was saying, no, let's do more but shorter. He was like, well, listen, we still have to make this Tenchi. So that's what he did. A lot of it got saved up towards the explosive, amazing, emotional finale that everybody had been hoping to see and eventually got. And I think, hopefully, with the way that was positively received, we'll see more of that in the future of those characters. But it was supposed to be a lot of things. A good majority of it was to be a love fest for the fans. There was so many callbacks that Pi and Chuck and many others have discovered digging through all the episodes, finding all the little cool callbacks to Universe, the OVA, possible winks and nudges in Tokyo's direction. The jury's still out on that one. But there were just so many things, and that's something a lot of people seem to be confused by, is they want to pin this into a specific continuity. Well, is this the Universe continuity? Is this the OVA continuity? Let's not forget that this series is one that has, on the back of every Funimation release, a galactic map showing the different places and the different timelines, the alternate realities of Tenchi, so that people don't get confused. Is brand new, but it pulls from all the others because it's not supposed to be a traditional Tenchi show. It's supposed to be a show for the fans, about the fans, by the fans. And the fans, by and large, loved it. They understood its message. and it's a sign of things to come. If you still love these characters, if we can make this happen, we will make it happen. So again, a lot of things I didn't get to see. I'm not sure if I can forgive the show for the lack of Kione. A lot of fans were waiting for Ryo-Ohki, and they only got her for about 15-20 frames total in the entire show, and that is a shame for them. At least you did get her. Beyond that, that's all it is. It's a love-in for the fans. So regardless of what I was hoping it would be, it did its job admirably. It just wasn't perfect. But then again, what is?
As much as I don't want to grade when I'm off duty, I'll go ahead and do it. I say 8.5 out of 10. And why I say 8.5 out of 10? I hold universe and the movies really, really highly, particularly the two movies. And I've been waiting a long time for Tenchi to fulfill Ochika's final words, which was he would give this back to Tenchi. He need it again someday. He used it. He definitely used his sword in this series. I'm not gonna lie, but I'm still waiting for that. Also, lack of Kione. Also, my own heart goes out. I haven't gotten Nagi or the Knights in many, many a year, and I want them back. But even though this show did not do what I liked, even though there wasn't this grand galactic war that I had been fantasizing about for eons now, even though I wasn't given all that, I was given a new host of characters who I could care about and fall in love with. The drama that you had with Momo and Benny, particularly at the end when Momo was given that choice of essentially destroy the universe or you go away. She did the Spock choice. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. I mean, there was so many things about the show there at the end that made it a very good show, a very good Tenchi Muyo series. And while it was not absolutely everything I begged and dreamed of, it is still a damn good show, and it is worth everyone's time to at least see once all the way through.
Ultimately, if I had to give Tenchi Muyo a rating, I would give it an 8 out of 10. And the reason being is that while it didn't, looking at it from the perspective of a non-Tenchi fan, it would be easy to give it a lower rating. But ultimately, as has been repeated so many times from the very beginning, this was a celebration of the franchise for Tenchi Muyo. It was made 100% with Tenchi fans in mind. And some have said, well, the format should have been like this if they wanted to do a true franchise celebration, or there wasn't enough of this. And while those comments are, comments that people have made on Tenchi Muyo and things that have been done in Tenchi Muyo, to me, I think those are pretty erroneous comments, because from the moment the series was announced, it was announced as an advertisement series with 54-minute episodes. Of course, we would all love a full-fledged series or a movie, but you can't blame the show for not having OVA or movie budgets or planning when it wasn't that from the very beginning. And this is the first time, as I've said many a time before, that the Tenchi franchise has ever done this. Your expectations need to meet a curve. If you can do that, you'll find a real gem of a series. And you can tell, also, I'm going to say completely unabashedly, that it was masterfully directed, because it's been compared to pretty much everything in Tenchi at this point. And from what I've seen, and I'm sure others have seen from the final comments on YouTube and other places, it's being almost universally praised by fans. Fans who want more and are waiting for the future with bright eyes and bushy tails. Now, I'd say that is a plus and a positive, and in my book, gives Tenchi Muyo the honor of having Tenchi Muyo in its name. Now, to lead us into the final Tenchi Talkback segment, Nil.
Would you put it that way? It's just, I need a minute. All right, everybody. It's that time again, and sadly, it's that final time again for us to talk about Tenchi Talkback. The Toonami Faithful podcast inspired hashtag campaign that we started at the beginning of Tenchi, because this was unique for a lot of people, in that this was the first mainline Tenchi series that dealt with the girls that we had with the current culture, with the current way social media works. And we wanted to try and use that to talk to you all and have you talk to us so that we could hear what you were saying, and then perhaps express your happiness, your doubts and worries, your general comments on here, and just discuss it, make you feel like you're part of the bigger picture. And I didn't think it was going to really take off the way it did. I was a little worried that we may not get comments at all. Maybe the social media aspect wouldn't necessarily take off with Tenchi fans, because a lot of them are just so classically minded. A lot of them may not even necessarily be on YouTube or Twitter, or Tumblr, or Facebook. So I was pleasantly surprised that first week we started it just on a whim. Thank you. Shout out to the Toonami Faithful podcast and to Yoku, who is not here, unfortunately. But, he did introduce me to them, and, they were the inspiration for the whole idea. So thank you, gentlemen. And, it's just been fun to get to talk to you all about these things. So this is our last one. And I've picked 2 comments. They both come from Facebook. So let's get to it then. Max Ruiz, also known as our very own Crazy Man, has been a phenomenal and frequent commenter of iTenchi Talkback. He's been with the show throughout its all ups and downs, and he was here until the very end. His comment being, "I'm not ready. I'm not ready. Naruto, Korra, and now this." This, of course, being posted on the finale episode. And something about this comment just stuck out to me, man. The way that he's bringing it up next to one of the big 3, Naruto finally ending. For the 2 of you who haven't been aware of that listening in on this. And of course, Korra being, a monster of its own right, just in a completely different way. To have Aitenchi be put into the same sentence as those 2 juggernauts of animation for the modern era, considering how long it's been out of the way, that's just crazy to me. Because when you think about it, way back in the day, Tenchi in Japan went head to head against the likes of Dragon Ball and other juggernauts that we still think about today. And it did the same when it came over to the States. It went neck and neck with monsters of Japanese animation on Toonami, and it still held its own. It still garnered a massive fan base in the States and worldwide. And it just goes to show, I think, the strength that these characters still have, and the way that something like these phenomenal 2 weeks can finally make somebody just say, you know what? This show, they're still some of the greatest that there ever has been. And I think Max's comment there is his frustration, not just with the closing of the traditional winter anime season, but to put iTenchi next to those 2 shows was a very strong statement, I felt, and I feel like there are many others who feel similarly. So while it's not necessarily something we may be able to talk about a whole lot, I did want to use that one. Does anybody have anything they want to throw in for that?
I will say that I have not always agreed with Mr. Max Rees on the things that he said, but I will agree with him that I am not ready. I figured, I very much felt like I was ready after finishing subbing that show. I'm sure that show, subbing that every single day for 2 or 3 months, took a few years off of my life. But I'm kind of sort of okay with them being gone in a really masochistic kind of way, because Tenchi Muyo was a really special show, and I think that Max, who has had a number of different comments, both positive and negative, about the show, I think really shows that Tenchi fans loved Tenchi Muyo and that they want more.
I just had this weird image of myself because, as we've said, it's amazing how it's been Tenchi, but it's also it's been current, and it was a currently airing anime, and most of our podcasts, if, for the old faithful out there, or if you go to our archives, we're talking about what has been long ago in many cases, but here with we were releasing them on a regular basis after each week as they were coming out, going to a convention to talk about it, and throwing our own ideas out there ahead of time, trying to see what it was going to do, and going back, we were wrong about certain stuff because we were, it was just fun to do that again. So I had this image of because I have not yet, but I really should. I need to go back and just sit down and just marathon it, watch it again. And when I thought about that and thinking about everything you guys were saying, I just had this image of myself watching years from now when it's not current, but I'm going to look at it pretty much the way I look at the other Tenchi series, because I think it'll hold up. It'll always be a good watch, but it's only going to accumulate with that the good memories and the feels factor, because I'm going to remember this. I'm going to remember when it was currently airing. I'm going to remember that's when Tenchi came back, and the slapstick humor and all that, and the new girls, even though they won't be new as the future goes on, all those moments are still going to be great, and I'm looking forward to that.
Hopefully it also won't take whoever brings it over here, more than likely Funimation, won't take them 3 years to get it like they did with War on Gemini.
Indeed. And on that note, I think if we may, we're going to include in the description of this final cast is there is going out right now, because as of right now, as of this recording, we don't know of, and there's no news on anyone, any of the big distributors here stateside or anywhere else outside of Japan for that matter, officially picking up and licensing the show. So trying to foresee that happening, because I think there's a good chance of it, how popular it's been. There is going around right now. We do have a petition that is for, hey, Funimation or whoever, but last time Funimation did it, they kind of dropped the ball there, and so we just wanted to try to anticipate that, give them a heads up, and if you want, it's not binding in any way, as you'll see on there, but basically, we were just kind of wanting to, I've signed it. I think a number of people here have as well, and basically, it's just saying, hey, if this gets picked up, if it's brought over here, since the Japanese end pretty much just did everything right when it comes to, they got all the, except for Aika's, who's retired, got a great replacement though. They got the original cast back. They got Negishi back. So if we have it over here, stateside or in the English-speaking world, let's do it right. Let's continue that trend and let's do it upright. And it will be that much more fondly remembered, and we'll do that much better. So just wanted to give a shout out to that on if people want to still be involved now that we're, oh no, I is over and there's not going to be that new episode waiting for you when you come home. But there's still a lot that we can do. There's a bandwagon to still jump on and be active, and we're going to keep doing that.
We talked to both Matt and Patria, and we asked them if they would be willing to come back and dub Tenchi Muyo, and they said if they were asked, they'd love to come back and do it.
And I'm sure with that ending, folks, there's a lot of, as we're trying to fit everything into a last cast here on our thoughts and stuff, if there's a lot of questions on but wait, the ending, and what about this, and this happened, what does that imply? What we got those questions too, absolutely. A lot of them we got answers for, but some we don't know right now as well. But the cool thing is, on the note of, if you still want to be involved and still do stuff, come on over to the forum and let's keep the discussion going, and we'll bounce ideas around, and we'll clear stuff up, and keep doing what we've been doing.
Indeed, the discussion on Tenchiforum has not ended and will not end for the foreseeable future, because the way I ended, especially with Negishi in particular saying, use your imaginations. Folks, if you want to join the speculations fest that we have going on at Tenchiforum.com, join up and check it out, because we've got plenty of material to work with. We've got screen caps, we've got old theories, we've got new theories, we've got parallel theories, we've got parallel trouble. What?
I believe in Japan that's pronounced Evangelion.
God damn.
I'm sorry, I had to.
Never mind about that. But we've got things going on, and we'd love for you guys to join in.
All right. Well, and then again, of course, we all feel the way Chuck did as well for Mr. Nil, Mr. Craze, Mr. Dagon, and if you're listening, Mr. Titan of Chaos. Thank you. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being on the front lines and for bringing Tenchi back to the rest of the world. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, Titan. This was mentioned at the end on the supercut for the final week, but I wanted to bring it up again. That Titan, he was doing work while on the plane to Japan on the final, I think it was the second to the last day of Tenchi. He was on the plane heading to Japan and working with us, like in the air, trying to get things done. It's dedication, man. Like this was a group effort, absolutely, and it just blows my mind how quickly it all came together at the last minute, and how compelled everybody became to get things done. That he was on his way to vacation and he was still working, joining the Mile High Club for fan subbers and translators. I don't know how many people could truly say that they've done that before. Right. So then, our second and last Tenchi Talkback ever. We have Darren Betts from Facebook, who says, I'm glad it's been left open for teenage Momo to possibly return with the Tenchi sensei that was spoken at the very end, with Momo's sword and the petals that seem to link between both dimensions. Not sure if the voice was from the sword or her spiritual form. It must have been something to do with what Mahoshi was detecting at the shrine. She did say that they would meet again in episode 59, which doesn't relate for her younger self. Really hope we get a continuation for the show. Great job, guys. I want to first off say thank you, Darren, for your comment, and thank you. We are, I should say, you're welcome for the work that we've done. It's absolutely appreciated, the kind words, for the work that's gone into this, and making sure that we could get it out to you as soon as possible, so that we could all live Tenchi as it happened. And there's a lot to kind of digest in this comment, but I thought it was pretty great because it's true. It's very open-ended. Leaves a lot of interpretation, a lot of possibility for continuation. In a way, kind of similar to the way that Tokyo did as well, where it was like, well, one day she may come back and, she'd be the one to get Tenchi. Ooh. Probably possibly in the same manner. There may not be a continuation and that it was just simply left open-ended, but I like the fact that it was left open-ended because there is the possibility for a continuation. Like I said, right now what I'm seeing, what I think is going to happen is that the new characters are going to get dumped off to Takahashi now that the series is over, and they will have control over them, while AIC will do whatever they will with the Tenchi girls and Tenchi himself proper, maybe even AIC lending the old characters to the advertising for Takahashi a little bit further. But there is the possibility that they all could return, and that there could be a Tenchi Muyo 2 or Tenchi Muyo in Love or something like that, like a new continuation. As it is, there is in fact a manga and several novelizations that will be being released, and Negishi had mentioned on Twitter that they had double the amount of content initially written for Tenchi and had to whittle it down. He said that a good portion of that will most likely see a way out through the manga and through the novelizations. So obviously there's more that they wanted to say, just didn't have the opportunity to, and they're doing it through alternate means. That could also mean that they have more plans for the characters, and as Negishi also said, it highly depends on how well it did, but it seems to have done very, very well from the positive reception that the Japanese fans seem to give it. That they want more Tenchi, and be it Tenchi or another Tenchi, they don't care. They just want it back more. So, continuation for the show, maybe, but absolutely left open. The possibilities for her to return, maybe. So there was a theorization that maybe in this continuity it was established that it wasn't Yosho and Katsuhito that established the Tenchi Shrine, or the Masaki Shrine, excuse me, but that it was actually Momo and Benny who did so somehow, or maybe they did in an alternate universe version of things, because it's what this was all about, alternate universes, different takes on things. So who is to say? Momo's sword ended up in inside the building somehow. So something is up. It's just a matter of what is it. And Nagishi's not saying, so I have to put up with it for a little while.
Well, one of the things that I really loved about the new characters, and in my personal opinion, I think all of the characters in Tenchi Muyo were introduced perfectly. I mean, short of Momo's very early introduction, and everybody else was done very, very well. Very, very much respectful to the old characters. And I would not be opposed in any way, shape, or form to seeing Benny and Momo show up in some capacity. If only those two from Tenchi Muyo, I believe they deserve a spot in the Masaki household because they were fantastic characters. They gelled really well with everybody. You know, they obviously gelled well with Tenchi and Ryoko at the very end. Ryoko and Benny have a mad bond. Even though it's not necessarily a bond of words, it's a bond of a kindred spirit. And I think that they would fit in very well. Kind of in the same vein as, Kiyone and Mihoshi did. Even though Kiyone and Mihoshi were new of Tenchi, they had their own deal going on. And I think, a lot of people try very early on, look at Tenchi or Tenchi and say, look at all these new girls that are going to get with Tenchi. If you believe that, you're wrong. Every one of these characters has their own backstory, even if only ever short in and Momo and Benny especially. Benny is there for Momo. She's not looking at Tenchi. I mean, the majority of the girls really didn't look at Tenchi in that way. They just played around with him. They're girls. He's a boy. It's what people do. But Momo in particular, you brought up the Sakuya thing. I think different than Sakuya is the fact that I don't think Momo ever really looked at Tenchi that way. She looked at him, at least from what I saw, is very much an older brother type of look, like a mentor role even, which is I think something Pi has brought up a couple times, and that in much the same way, you losing anybody that you really care about, she got very emotional because she really cared about Tenchi. Tenchi was somebody who was always there for her, and as we saw in the very ending of the show, in some ways was the only person who was there for her because she was always left behind. And so I think that I would love to see an Tenchi Muyo in Love, or a final Tenchi Muyo, or Tenchi Muyo in Tokyo, whatever, anything that they would decide to do with Tenchi, I would love to see more of a continuation of it. But I definitely think we will be seeing more in the future, and we can thank Tenchi Muyo for that.
Also, I've been wanting to throw this one out. In the last episode when they have the music playing and you start getting the feels of seeing Benny and Momo in the 1300 years ago era timeline, whichever universe they ended up getting dropped into. The visual that kind of calls me back. It's just like seeing Ryoko on the shrine gates. It's one of those nostalgic images that makes the feels just get all warm and bubbly. But the image I'm talking about here is when Momo and Benny walk out on that little outcropping just past a forest and you see all these autumn leaves falling behind her and around her. That smells and feels a lot like the end of Universe, in the sense that if you remember when Yosho was telling his backstory in episode 22, you see young Yosho standing on almost the exact same outcropping, just with older art. And he's looking out on how Earth looks to his eyes, and he says it's very pleasing to his grief-stricken eyes. But you also see that when Tenchi faces Kagato at the end of Universe in episode 25, when Tenchi Aiken, Sasami, and Kagato even have the same vision of the Earth on Jirai, and you have all these autumn leaves falling around him. That imagery just strikes really hard home to me, and I don't think this series is completely done. I like the fact that it's open-ended, and you see like Mahoshi's using dowsing rods at the end. It's like, I'm looking for treasure. And then you of course hear Momo's voice ever so briefly with her sword inside the shrine. There's more story to be told here, whether it will be told visually through anime or through the written word or what have you, just remains to be seen. Support your local Tenchi, because that's probably the way we're going to get to see more.
One of the things too that it has been brought up a lot, and this is, I want to reiterate what Nil has brought up to some people, is Tenchi Muyo is not a continuation of Tenchi Universe. It is an amalgamation of all of Tenchi Muyo as a whole. While there are many callbacks, quite a few callbacks to Tenchi Universe, probably largely due to Hiroshi Negishi directing it, there are just as many things in there that aren't universe and are very much from the OVA. In particular, they refer to Washu by her name Hakubi Washu, who is always foiling the Galaxy Police. That's OVA. When Sasami and Aika go to confront Ukon about them doing matters and such, they do it in the garb that has been shown very prevalently in the OVA and does not exist in universe. You know, the one thing that we've talked about a number of times is Gariki-kun. He's a big pink mech. Many of us believe or are under the impression that that's probably a callback to Tenchi in Tokyo, where Ryo-Ohki would transform into a giant pink mech. So there's a number of different things that this series has done and attempted, and even referenced things that may or may not exist in any continuity. Like, again, we've referenced Call Me Princess, where Aika was very much the dominatrix type. That doesn't, that's not something that could exist in universe and very much stands on its own. It's calling from everything in Tenchi Muyo. So the importance there is that you don't try to pigeonhole it. You try to let it be its own thing. And Pi just said a minute ago that it leaves it very open-ended. One of the important things I want to point out is that even though it is open-ended, it gives you closure. There's very much closure to what's going on. And the way that it's directed, you feel that way. Sure, everybody has questions. There's a number of different questions that people have, but you never really feel like they left something important out. Which is, one of the reasons that I rated it so high. Couldn't quite rate it a 9, but was really close, was the fact that as far as Tenchi series are concerned, this show probably deserves a 10 out of 10 because you can actually follow it. It is a marked increase in writing ability on the part of everyone. It is a fantastic directional upgrade. And even though it is only 4 minutes long, and even though you only get, in comparison to other Tenchi shows, a small blip in time, the fact that it did what it did in 50 episodes at 4 minutes apiece, or really 3.5, is beyond astounding. So, not universe, support I, and hopefully, maybe, just maybe, that In Love 3 tease that Hiroshi Negishi has been talking about will be a thing.
Since Dagon brought this up, I'll go ahead and throw this out here too. I would like to issue a formal apology for all of the universe references I've thrown out. I am a universe guy, always have been, probably always will be until Tenchi Muyo in Love 3 becomes a thing and I get to see more dark energy stuff. But there are a lot of things that throw back the OVA in this series. I could enumerate them in due time, but one in particular thing I wanted to throw out that harkens back OVA 1 and has not been touched on since OVA 1 is the keys. The keys, the sword keys in particular in this series, were originally used as controlling ships and controlling trees, as well as being energy weapons. In fact, I think Kagato says in OVA 1 that it's a tool for drawing energy from the ship. It's not meant to be its own thing when he's battling Tenchi in episode 6 of the original OVA. And that's almost exclusively what Momo uses hers for. And it's something that hasn't really been referenced again since that point. When I was saying that a lot of things that were being brought back from a long time ago, that was what I was mentioning. I was meaning that things from OVA 1 that have been long forgotten, things that have been kind of undercurrents and pieces of the mythos that seem to have been lost, were being brought back. Again, celebration of the franchise, everything's getting touched on. And if they were to go back to OVA 1 and start animating Tazagawa's novels, I wouldn't be brokenhearted in the least. I'd love to see some of the things that are going on in there.
It's like I've said before, let's just call it a celebration of everything, because, what hasn't it referenced? Multiple Indiana Jones movies, Men in Black, Alien, Neon Genesis Evangelion, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, just to name a few.
FLCL knocking it out the park.
I think a few people even said something about when Gariki-kun was hitting the bat. Most of us went to FLCL, but there were a couple people on YouTube and Facebook who had made references to Die Rugger and Getter Robo. Which, as we've talked about a number of different times before, Hiroshi Negishi is the man who directed Tekkaman Blade. So he's obviously, and of course the Ava references, which are more than more than blatantly references to Ava. You could tell that Hiroshi Nagishi was a big mecha guy. I know I would not be opposed to seeing, even if it was just a fun little off thing, having like, we have Bubblegum Crisis set in AIC. I know we talked about this a little bit with like, AIC is trying to bring Tenchi back. If there were other franchises that they could bring back, the two that me and Pi had kind of come to the conclusion that they would bring back first, more than anything else, would be Bubblegum Crisis and El Hazard, because those were the two other biggest franchises that they had back in the day. And I said I would absolutely be not at all opposed to seeing like a giant AIC crossover. And I mean, can you imagine the girls getting their own Night Saber suits?
Sign me up.
I guess we'll have to call them the Big Hero 6.
Shit, Kiami's done it. She's not even in here.
I'll say that was so bad she muted. She wasn't even
For
in
a
here.
second, I thought you were going to say there needed to be an Ava crossover. I was like, I don't know how they'd swing that. I was like, what's it going to be? Tenchi getting a goddamn robot.
Tenchi just looked back at all things that have happened so far in this series, and he's just like, God, I'm so fucked up.
With just a much more nasally, funny voice. Yeah, I'm so fucked up.
Oh man.
If you're not going to pilot it, then leave.
Fucking Washu telling that to Tenchi, because I have a use for you.
Oh, Jesus.
I can see her saying that to Mihoshi. Mihoshi being like, okay.
No, wait, I don't. Never mind. No, I take it back. I don't have a use for you. Go away.
Tells it to Tenchi. Mahoshi steps up, is like, I can do it, Washu. No, you sit back down.
Well, I think that about wraps it up there for this edition of iTenchi Talkback, and for all editions of iTenchi Talkback. Much like the show, sadly, this carnival has left town for now. Who knows? Maybe it'll be back in the future. It has been a pleasure and an honor to speak to every single person who has wanted to talk back to us and have their thoughts read aloud. Max and Darren for this week, as well as those who have commented in the past for iTenchi Talkback and otherwise on the Facebook. Greg, Angel, James, Ezra, Juan, Tachini, Gabriel, Sam, Trent, Cody, Melissa, Jacopo, David, Robert, Rachel, Chris, Javier, Jeffrey, another Juan, Frederick, Darren, Jose, Keita, Robert, and possibly half a dozen more that I might have missed. Tried to get as many as I possibly could. My apologies if you were not there, as well as everybody who said things or shared or liked on Tumblr, and all of those lovely people who fostered discussion in the YouTube comments. This felt fantastic to just have the community come together again and just talk Tenchi. And that's what this whole segment was about, and without all of you it would not have succeeded. So thank you for giving us this chance to talk to you that we may not otherwise have had. It's been a fantastic ride this carnival, and I hope we have the opportunity to do so again soon. So with that, I will hand the microphone off to Dagon to carry us off for the last time on the iTenchi-centric podcast of Tenchicast.
Even though this particular ride, this seasonal ride in the carnival is shutting down, the carnival is still going pretty well. Especially if you can find 5 all scrolls in Japan. But if you like what you heard, subscribe to us on YouTube. Follow us on iTunes. And if you're into social media, we're probably on it. Twitter, Tumblr, Facebook, Pinterest, and everything in between. And if you like discussing Tenchi, head on over to Tenchiforum.com, where much like the ever-going carnival, the discussion never ends. Until next time, I Tenchi Muyo. Stay gold.